Okay, this is your lecture on sentence clarity, and as you can see, it's a workshop brought to you by the Purdue University Writing Lab. So various grad students and English professors and directors from Purdue University have put together the PowerPoint that you're going to see. I, however, am narrating this, and I am your English professor, Lisette Blanco-Cerda. This video presentation lecture, it's going to introduce you to common clarity problems, including misplaced modifiers, dangling modifiers, parallel structures, and passive voice constructions. Be sure that, besides this video, make sure you refer to your textbook for further information on sentence structures and style. And of course, you can check out Purdue OWL, Purdue Online Writing Lab, for more information as well. This slide is 36 slides long, so I anticipate this lecture to be about 35 to 40 minutes, so make sure you give yourself plenty of time to go through this lecture. And of course, since it's a video, you can stop it at any time, rewind or whatever, and pick it up again later. Okay, so the next slide is sentence clarity, and this one talks about the reasons that sentence clarity is an important part of writing. Why worry about making sentences clear? Well, to communicate effectively with your reader, to make writing persuasive and interesting, and to show credibility and authority as a writer. I mentioned in an earlier lecture, or in a later lecture, depends on how I'm going to present it in the course, but I mentioned in another lecture that your readers, just like you, are very busy. And just like you do, your readers guard their time jealously. So you want to make sure that your writing is interesting to them, so they will devote time out of their busy lives to read. Communication is the most important function of sentence clarity. For example, a new computer that comes with unclear directions for setting it up may cause mistakes and frustration for its new owner, and that sucks. Persuasion is also important. If a job applicant writes a cover letter with unclear, confusing sentences, the applicant will definitely have trouble persuading an employer that he or she is the most qualified for the job. That ties in with the writer's credibility. Clear, well-phrased sentences demonstrate a writer's credibility and authority. The mastery of the subject matter and the competency to communicate well to others is essential, so don't take that lightly. Common clarity concerns. This presentation is going to cover 4 topics. 1, misplaced modifiers. The next one's dangling modifiers. The third one is parallel structures. And the fourth one is the passive voice. So this is what we're going to cover in this lecture. Misplaced modifiers, dangling modifiers, parallel structures, and the passive voice. Okay, misplaced modifiers. First of all, what's a modifier? A modifier describes or clarifies or gives more detail about other words in a sentence. A modifier can be a word or group of words, in other words, a phrase. A misplaced modifier, on the other hand, is a modifier in the wrong place in a sentence, and as a result, it makes the sentences awkward, confusing, or unintentionally humorous. And yes, when there are misplaced modifiers and your sentence has a completely different meaning that you didn't intend it to be, people will giggle. They will get a kick out of it. Continuing with misplaced modifiers, look at these sentence examples. Do these sentences have different meanings? Why? The dog under the tree bit Carrie, and the dog bit Carrie under the tree. Take a few moments and look at this. Look at the difference in meaning between these two sentences. The first sentence explains that that dog under that tree bit Carrie. Okay, the dog is presently located under the tree. On the other hand, the second sentence indicates that the act of biting Carrie occurred under the tree. Depending on the placement of the modification phrase under the tree, the meaning of a sentence can change dramatically. This is a simple example to illustrate the importance of modifying phrases, but I want you to imagine the confusion misplaced modifiers can cause in directions, legal documents, or business letters. Also think of other sentences where misplaced modifiers create confusion or ambiguity. Sometimes modifiers are intentionally used for comic effect. And this is a famous line by Groucho Marx. One morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I don't know. Let's see if you can hear this.
One morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I don't know.
Okay, so now we see a funny sentence. Note that "in my pajamas" is the modifying phrase in this example. One morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I don't know. And what he meant to say, or what's supposed to be the correct way, is that he was in his pajamas, not the elephant. How can you correct this sentence? Buffy called her adorable kitten, opening the can of food and filled the bowl. First of all, here's a simple process to go through. What is a modifier? What is that phrase or word that gives more information about the subject or the main noun in that sentence? What word does it describe, clarify, or give more detail about? Where should the modifier be placed? Typically, modifiers go next to the word or phrase they modify. So think about this sentence. Buffy called her adorable kitten, opening the can of food and filled the bowl. Since the modifying phrase opening the can of food or the can of tuna is right next to the kitten, the way that sentence is written, it looks like the kitten is opening the can of food. Here's a misplaced modifier. Buffy called her adorable kitten, opening the can of food and filled the bowl. Here's the correctly placed modifier. Opening the can of food, Buffy called her adorable kitten and filled the bowl. So this is how you correct the misplaced modifier. Another option, or another correct option, is quote, Buffy, comma, opening the can of tuna or can of food, comma, called her adorable kitten and filled the food bowl. End quote. A series of verb phrases would also be correct. Quote, Buffy opened the can of tuna, called her adorable kitten, and filled the food bowl. End quote. I'm stuck on tuna for some reason. I keep saying the can of tuna. Notice how the last sentence is parallel. Buffy opened the can of food, comma, called her adorable kitten, comma, and filled the food bowl. End quote. Each verb is in the same tense and each phrase is in the same construction. Verb plus determining word, the, her, the, and noun of food, adorable kitten, food bowl. So that's another way you can correct the misplaced modifier. Parallel verb phrases, or a series of verb phrases. Excuse me. Look at this one. How can you correct this sentence? Portia rushed to the store loaded with cash to buy Guy's birthday present. Again, the process. Ask yourself, what is the modifier? What word does it describe, clarify, or give more detail about? Where should the modifier be placed? Modifiers, remember, go next to the word or phrase they modify. So can you define the problem with the first sentence? Portia rushed to the store loaded with cash to buy Guy's birthday present. The way it's written is the store is loaded with cash. So the phrase loaded with cash is the modifying phrase. And again, the way this sentence is written, loaded with cash, the store is loaded with cash. The store isn't the one loaded with cash. It should be Portia. Portia rushed to the store loaded with cash to buy Guy's birthday present. A correctly placed modifier, Portia, loaded with cash, rushed to the store to buy Guy's birthday present. Notice the difference. So the modifying phrase, loaded with cash, needs to be placed as close as possible to what it modifies, in this case, Portia. The slide offers one correct option. Another is, quote, loaded with cash, comma, Portia rushed to the store to buy Guy's birthday gift. End quote. So the modifying phrase, loaded with cash, is still directly next to what it's modifying, Portia. One-word modifiers that limit can easily be misplaced, and I see this a lot in student writing. These one-word modifiers include words like almost, even, exactly, hardly, just, merely, nearly, only, scarcely, and simply. Not all modification problems are in the form of a phrase. These 8 words can also cause confusion within sentences when they are placed next to words that they are not meant to modify. So, to be clear, place the modifier immediately before the word or phrase you want to limit. Excuse me. Consider the meaning of each sentence here on this slide and answer the slide's final question. Which sentence indicates that everyone in the class failed the exam? First sentence is almost everyone in the class passed the calculus exam. Second one is everyone in the class almost passed the calculus exam. The second sentence, everyone in the class almost passed the calculus exam, indicates that everyone in the class failed the exam because almost modifies the verb phrase. Everyone almost passed. They came close to passing but did not make the grade. In the first sentence, however, almost everyone in the class passed the calculus exam, almost modifies everyone. Almost everyone passed. Most people passed, but a few did not. Which sentence indicates that Jean-Luc earned some money? First one, Jean-Luc nearly earned $100. Second one, Jean-Luc earned nearly $100. So consider how to answer this slide's final question. Which sentence indicates that Jean-Luc earned some money? In the second sentence, Jean-Luc earned nearly $100. Nearly modifies $100. Therefore, Jean-Luc earned nearly 100. Not quite 100, perhaps 98, perhaps 90, perhaps $85, but not quite $100. In the first sentence, nearly modifies the verb earned. Jean-Luc nearly earned the money, but he failed to earn it. Okay, so to review, a misplaced modifier is a modifier in the wrong place in a sentence. And the process to correct misplaced modifiers: ask what is the modifier, what word does it describe, clarify, or give more detail about, and where should the modifier be placed. Remember, modifiers go next to the word or phrase they modify, and one-word limiting modifiers go directly before the word or phrase they modify. Now we go to dangling modifiers. So this slide is going to offer a formal description of dangling modifiers. A dangling modifier does not sensibly modify anything in its sentence. The modifier is present, but it has nothing to modify. A dangling modifier often occurs at the beginning or end of a sentence, and a dangling modifier often indicated by an ing verb or a to plus verb phrase. Okay? So, what is the modifier modifying? Consider what the underlying modifier describes. It should describe the person who finished eating and turned on the television, but in this sentence, the person is absent. Having finished dinner, the rugby match was turned on. So the way it's written, the sentence contains a dangling modifier. It sounds like the rugby game just finished dinner. Okay? Remember, modifiers go next to the words or phrases they modify. So you've got 3 ways to fix dangling modifiers. 1. Name the appropriate doer of the action as the subject of the main clause. Having finished dinner, Jude turned on the rugby match. Place the subject of the action within the dangling modifier. After Jude finished dinner, he turned on the rugby match. Or the third way to fix a dangling modifier, combine the phrase and clause. Jude turned on the rugby match after finishing dinner. So there are several ways to repair sentences with dangling modifiers. This slide shows you 3 ways to correct the sentence from the preceding slide, which is the rugby match sentence. The first way should be a review of the previous principle of misplaced modifiers. The modifier phrase, having finished dinner, must be right next to Jude. Consider how you'd correct this problem or this sentence. How would you describe the problem with this sentence? Playing solitaire on the computer for 3 hours, Michael's paper was not finished. Go through the process. What is the modifier? What word does it describe, clarify, or give more detail about? Do you need to insert the doer? Where should the modifier be placed? Remember, modifiers go next to the word or phrase they modify. So the way the sentence is currently written, Michael's paper is the one that played solitaire for 3 hours, not Michael. What are think of some suggestions how you can correct this, again using that process. The next slide shows you 3 revised sentences. The first revised sentence is, playing solitaire on the computer for 3 hours, Michael did not complete his paper. This first option corrects the sentence by placing Michael, the doer of the action, as the subject of the sentence. The second sentence, because Michael played solitaire on the computer for 3 hours, he did not complete his paper. This version corrects the sentence by placing Michael within the modification phrase, which is, because Michael played solitaire on the computer for 3 hours. And the third version, Michael did not complete his paper because he played solitaire on the computer for 3 hours. This version corrects the sentence by eliminating the introductory clause and making it a subordinate clause at the end of the sentence. Now let's look at these versions. How would you correct each one? To work as a loan officer, an education and financial planning is required. To improve her grade, the test was completed again. After reading the original study, the article remains unconvincing. Look at how the first sentence states that an education is the one who will work as a loan officer. The second sentence states the test was improving her grade, and the third one states that the article was reading the original study. The doer is absent in pretty much each of these sentences. So here are some revisions. To work as a loan officer, one needs an education in financial planning. She repeated the test to improve her grade, and after reading the original study, I find the article unconvincing. Remember, there are other options. Refer to the previous slides if you need to, but there are other options. These aren't the only ways to correct the sentences. The problem in the first sentence is a lack of a subject, a person who will work as a loan officer. It's corrected here by inserting the pronoun one. The problem in the second sentence is similar to the first. The agent or person doing the action in the verbs is missing. To correct it, the sentence is rewritten in the active voice. It was passive, with she as the subject/agent. And the third sentence is missing a subject as well. In this example, you just add the word I in there. Okay, to review, a dangling modifier is that a modifier is present, but it has nothing to modify. A dangling modifier often occurs at the beginning or end of a sentence, and it's often indicated by an ing verb or a to plus verb phrase. And the process to correct dangling modifiers: name the appropriate or logical doer of the action as the subject of the main clause, place the subject of the action within the dangling modifier, or combine the phrase and clause. Now we're moving on to parallel structure. Parallel structure, it's basically using the same pattern of words to show that two or more ideas are equally important. The key idea there is it's the same pattern of words. Parallel structure applies to words, phrases, or clauses, and parallel structure usually uses coordinating conjunctions and, or, but, etc. to join those parallel structures. With the ing form or gerund of verbs, and here we see I made them blue, the gerund and the verbs. Here's a parallel structure. Mary likes hiking, swimming, and bicycling. Each of those, hiking, swimming, and bicycling, are ing form of verbs. An ing form of a verb is called a gerund. With the infinitive verb, in this slide they're red, infinitive verbs have the word to and then the verb, to plus verb. So here we see it's parallel. Mary likes to hike, to swim, and to ride a bicycle, or Mary likes to hike, swim, and ride a bicycle. The first version, to hike, to swim, and to ride, we definitely have the same pattern of the infinitive verb, to, verb, to, verb, to, verb. The second version, we only need the word to once. Note the note at the bottom. Use to before all of the verbs in a sentence or only before the first one. Don't mix. So if you have Mary likes to hike, swim, and to ride a bicycle, that is incorrect. With a clause parallel structure, It's a group of words containing subject plus verb which forms part of a sentence. A parallel structure that begins with clauses must continue with clauses. Here's an example. The coach told the players that they should get a lot of sleep, not eat too much, and do some warm-up exercises before the game. So we've got get a lot of sleep, eat too much, do some warm-up exercises. We have parallel structure in clause form. Look at these sentences. Take a few moments and identify the sentences out of the 3 pairs of sentences on this slide that show parallel structure in a way they list the 3 words or phrases. The first pair, Dino does not like to sing, dance, or acting. Dino does not like singing, dancing, or acting. Which one is parallel? If you pick the second one, Dino does not like singing, dancing, or acting as parallel, you're correct. All of those verbs, singing, dancing, acting, they're all ing forms of verbs. They are all gerunds. The first sentence starts off with infinitives, to sing, dance, and then we're thrown by the third verb, which is a gerund. What about the second pair? The production manager was asked to write his report quickly, accurately, and thoroughly. Or, the production manager was asked to write his report quickly, accurately, and in a detailed manner. If you pick the first one as parallel, you're correct. Quickly, accurately, thoroughly are all verbs ending in ly. The second sentence begins with adverbs but ends in a prepositional phrase, in a detailed manner. Since it begins with the word in, which is a preposition, the words following that form a prepositional phrase. And finally, the third pair of sentences. Aldous was a poor student because he waited until the last minute to study, completed his lab problems carelessly, and lacked motivation. The second version is Aldous was a poor student because he waited until the last minute to study, was always completing his lab problems carelessly, and his motivation was low. The first sentence is parallel. There are 3 verb phrases in the past tense form. The second sentence mixes verb forms. So the first sentence, 3 verb phrases in the past tense, he waited, completed, and lacked. There's the parallel structure. The second sentence in that pair, we've got mixed verb forms. Waited was always completing, and his motivation was low. That one really doesn't even have a verb other than was. Look at this sentence and figure out how you can correct it. The sales rep expected that she would present her product at the meeting, that there would be time for her to show her slide presentation, and that questions would be asked by prospective buyers. The next slide is going to show a corrected version of this. The sales rep expected that she would present her product at the meeting, that there would be time for her to show her slide presentation, and that prospective buyers would ask her questions. Each clause, she would present her product, there would be time for her to show, prospective buyers would ask her questions. Each clause starts with that plus subject plus would plus verb, and therein lies the parallelism. When you're dealing with lists after a colon, the verb structures must remain consistent. I've seen many times where writers, they have a list after a colon and the verb structures are inconsistent, and it gets very confusing for the reader. And that's one of the things you want to remember. Writing is difficult work, and part of that difficulty is you want to make it as easy as possible for the reader without dumbing down your writing. So your reader, like I said earlier, your reader guards his or her time very jealously. Your reader does not want to have to work for meaning. But the reader still wants to be engaged intellectually, still would like to be challenged, get them to think about something. And that's where the difficulty lies. So with lists after a colon, be sure to keep all the elements in a list in the same form. Take a few moments to look at the sentence. The dictionary can be used for these purposes: to find word meanings, pronunciations, correct spellings, and looking up irregular verbs. Identify the problem with that sentence. The problem's with the final phrase. It introduces a new verb structure. So one way to revise this sentence for parallel structure would be, quote, "The dictionary can be used for these purposes, colon, to find to find word meanings, pronunciations, correct spellings, and irregular verbs." So get rid of that looking up part in there. Here are some proofreading strategies for parallel structure. You can use when you're proofreading your papers, and you should always proofread your papers, many times in fact. One way is to skim your paper, pausing at and or. Check on each side of these words to see if the joined items are parallel. If you have several items in a list, put them in a column. Read your writing out loud. Listen to the sound of the items in a list or the items being compared. Do you hear the same kinds of sounds? Do you hear a rhythm? If something breaks that rhythm or repetition of sound, check if it needs to be made parallel. When I proofread my own stuff and I'm reading and my voice falters on something, I go in and circle that area and I continue reading, proofreading. That way I can go back and check to see if the repetition, what caused that repetition of sound. Chances are it's a lack of parallelism. The next thing we're going to talk about in this lecture is passive voice. Passive voice, what is it? It indicates what is receiving action, not who or what is doing the action. Typically, active voice is normal for English, and it's more common. And honestly, active voice tends to be much more interesting to read and more engaging to read. 2 clues for the passive voice. Verb takes form of to be plus past tense transitive verb. By phrase is optional. And here are some examples. The cat was brushed by Johanna. Active version, Johanna brushed the cat. Notice the difference. Mistakes were made by the government. Active voice, the government made mistakes. And then the third example is mistakes were made. Active voice, someone made mistakes. Passive voice isn't wrong per se, but it does affect the sentence and paragraph clarity and unity, and it can weigh down writing. It can also be used as a way to deflect responsibility. And what makes writing interesting and fascinating and strong is when there's agency, when we're clear on who is doing what, and the person or the subject of whatever sentence is taking responsibility for that. So it's very important you understand the difference between the active and passive voice. Many people, many students tend to think that good academic writing is written in the passive voice, and no, it's not. So strive for active voice in your writing. Read the sentence on this slide and identify the passive construction within. Think about how you can turn it into an active sentence. Remember to consider the difference in emphasis between the active and passive forms. Here's a sentence. The decision that was reached by the committee was to postpone the vote. How can you correct that? How can you make that active? Well, here are a couple of suggested revisions. Both are active voice constructions, but the sentence puts the action in the verb and is more concise. One of the problems with the passive voice is that it tends to be wordy, so active sentences should also avoid excess words. And that's one thing you want to avoid in your writing is wordiness. A lot of words to say something little, so avoid that. Here are the suggested revisions. Better. The committee reached the decision to postpone the vote. And here's the best version there. The committee decided to postpone the vote. Notice that sense of agency. It's the second one, the committee decided to postpone the vote, is much more powerful because the committee takes responsibility to postpone the vote. Read these 2 sentences and think about why these sentences might actually be best left in the passive voice. Context is important. So think about some hypothetical situations where the passive voice would be better and other situations where the active voice would be better. Remember in the lecture for the rhetorical situation, context is very important. Here's the first sentence. The disk drive of the computer was damaged by the electrical surge. The first sentence might be best as a passive construction if the writer wants to emphasize what part of the computer was damaged, the disk drive. The second sentence, Michael was robbed in the park last night, might be best as a passive construction because it emphasizes the fact that Michael, perhaps somebody we know, had something terrible happen to him. We probably don't know who robbed him, so it might sound odd to write this sentence in the active as, quote, a thief robbed Michael in the park last night, or someone robbed Michael in the park last night. If that's the case, then the thief or someone becomes the focus of that sentence and not Michael, the person that we know. If we know who robbed Michael or there is something interesting about the thief, then perhaps the sentence would be best cast in the active voice. For example, an elderly woman robbed Michael in the park last night. And the third sentence, those books were purchased especially for tomorrow's lecture. This sentence, the emphasis is on the fact that the books have been purchased. If it doesn't matter or it's not known who purchased the books, then the passive voice is probably better. If we want to emphasize the person who purchased the books, then the active voice is probably best. For example, Karen purchased those books especially for tomorrow's lecture. She will be furious if you take them today. Okay, so the emphasis in that version is on Karen, not necessarily the fact that the books have been purchased. But if it doesn't matter who purchased them, what matters instead is that the books have been purchased, then use the passive voice. Remember to think critically about why the passive voice can be useful in certain contexts. Don't just write or stay in the passive out of default. Think critically about why the passive voice would be better in a certain situation or context. So that comes to the end of our lecture. If you need help with writing, several specific reference sources you can go to get answers to your specific question about writing. The Northeast Campus Writing Center, which is in the Academic Classroom Building, NACB 1114, and their phone number is 817-515-6936. Definitely go by there, talk to an English tutor. I know many faculty do office hours in there. Many English faculty do office hours in there. Stop by and get some help. You can also go to Purdue Online Writing Lab's website, and there's the URL http://al.english.purdue.edu. Folks, that is an award-winning site. I worked there for a couple of years when I was a grad student at Purdue, and it is just fascinating and fantastic resource. Take advantage of it, and it's free. Here's a fun place, the Grammar Gang blog spot. It's fun to me. I do like grammar and English and all that stuff. I am a grammar geek. You might find it interesting, who knows, but you can read some blog entries about, different types of grammar problems or writing or syntax problems. Purdue has a grammar hotline. Here is the email, unless you want to make a long distance call. You can find their phone number at the Purdue OWL website, but otherwise here's the email, http://owl.english.purdue.edu/contact/owl-mail-tutors. That works really well. When I was working there, we had the goal to answer questions within 24 hours. I don't know if it's changed, but that's another source you can use. And of course, your textbook. Check out your textbook. Any other questions? Tweet me at @LBlancoCerta. If you are in my distance learning class, send me a message on Google+. You can email me, and there's my email address, and it's also on the syllabus. And my phone, my office, 817-515-6198. Just know, though, that through email, I check that once, maybe twice a day. I do not check email during the weekends, so it is actually a longer response time. On Twitter, I have my smartphone with me pretty much all the time. On weekends, I do not respond. I do not check Twitter. So keep that in mind when you're asking for help. All right. See you later, and I'll see you in the class, or I'll see you on Google Plus. Bye-bye.